Ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Καλούμε την κυρία Νικόλτσιου και τον κύριο Άντριου McDowell.
Λοιπόν, μπορούμε να συνεχίσουμε με την επόμενη συζήτησή μας. Λοιπόν, βρισκόμαστε στους Δελφούς, ένα οικονομικό φόρουμ και βεβαίως το μεγάλο θέμα των συζητήσεων το τελευταίο διάστημα είναι κατά πόσον οι ελληνικές επιχειρήσεις και γενικά οι επιχειρήσεις έχουν επενδύσεις, έχουν χρηματοδότηση και η μεγάλη γκρίνια των Ελλήνων επιχειρηματιών είναι ότι υπάρχει ένα έλλειμμα στη χρηματοδότηση λόγω της αδυναμίας των τραπεζών να επενδύσουν. Αυτό είναι το θέμα μας και έχουμε τη χαρά σήμερα να φιλοξενούμε δύο κορυφαίους τραπεζίτες από δύο κορυφαίες θεσμικές τράπεζες. Και το ερώτημα βεβαίως είναι κατά πόσον αυτό το έλλειμμα στη χρηματοδότηση προκειμένου να γίνουν επενδύσεις, οι δύο αυτές θεσμικές τράπεζες, η EIB, η European Investment Bank και η Παγκόσμια Τράπεζα, μπορούν να το καλύψουν. Ευθύς αμέσως λοιπόν να καλέσω στο βήμα τον πρώτο μας ομιλητή, είναι ο κύριος Άντριου McDowell, Vice President του European Investment Bank, Luxembourg. Παρακαλώ, the floor is yours. You're Irish, I suppose. You have 12 minutes. Do you want here or you prefer there? What do you prefer? It's better here. Yeah, here.
I have a few prepared remarks, is that? Or should I just take questions from you?
No, you do your remarks, and after we have two questions from the audience.
Okay.
We have 12 minutes.
Thank
okay?
you,
Okay.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Marina. I need my glasses. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased, very honored to be here today with you, and thank you very much to the organizers for the invitation to participate in a forum with such distinguished guests and in such a beautiful location, I have to say. As the European Investment Bank Vice President, newly responsible for lending activity in Greece, it gives me great pleasure to be with you here in Delphi today, which is actually my first official visit to the country. In fact, I've only taken over oversight responsibility for our operations in Greece about a month ago. Many of you will have known my predecessor, Jonathan Taylor, who tirelessly worked to develop the business here over the last number of years. In fact, Jonathan has just retired, and I fear, obviously, that Jonathan may prove to have been the last British Vice President of the European Investment Bank, but who knows? We shall see. I am Irish. Prior to joining the European Investment Bank, I was economic advisor to the former Irish Prime Minister, Enda Kenny. In fact, many of you will know Ireland and Greece share a constituency in the European Investment Bank. So we have 9 members of our management committee, 8 vice presidents and the president. For the 4 large member states, the UK, Italy, Germany, France, have a permanent vice president. The other 24 countries share the right on a rotating basis to appoint a vice president. And Ireland shares that right with Greece, Romania and Denmark. So I'm very proud that I was jointly nominated by the governments of Greece, Ireland, Denmark and Romania to this position. So thank you very much. Ireland and Greece also share experience of the economic sacrifices required for successful implementation of an economic adjustment program. To address a crisis that we in Ireland recognize was the result of not just unsustainable domestic economic policies, although that was obviously a big part of it in both Ireland and Greece, but also to address design flaws in economic and monetary union that exacerbated the scale of the crisis in both countries. And indeed, deficiencies that are only slowly being rectified, and that's maybe something we can come back to. The conference topic of inclusive growth is by all means timely, of course. In many developed countries, Ireland, Greece included, inequalities, under many definitions, are at their highest levels in 30 years, and the gap is indeed widening. We all feel and recognize that at this very important moment, we need to focus the debate on how we can fairly share the benefits of economic growth, how we can achieve acceptable gender balances across the civil and business community, how we can better involve our younger generation in economic recovery through entrepreneurship and employment, how we can attain the highest standards in education, in innovation, and not to be ignored in our overall well-being. We clearly need to act. Aiming for inclusive growth is probably best served by an aim for a sustainable economic growth with widespread participation. It clearly requires a long-term approach based on long-term investing, giving the emphasis to value-creating, productivity-enhancing, sustainable initiatives as a means of increasing incomes for all, and in particular for excluded groups. Sustainable and inclusive growth also requires governments to invest in more efficient and competent public services, to serve and support citizens and businesses, and to tackle the problem of the vulnerable left behind parts of society. In this regard, governments should, I believe, recognize the value of a thriving private sector for innovation, for wage-generating value added, and for the creation of more, newer, and better jobs. And last but not least, governments should act responsibly and develop policies in the spirit of affordability, sustainability, economic viability, and social fairness. Now, of course, these are all laudable ambitions. But of course, in trying to get the balance right between competing priorities, it is for sure not easy to be a politician, not least in this beautiful country. And many of them, I think, fully deserve our recognition and respect for the tough choices they have made and are still willing to make. But in making these tough choices and in charting the path ahead, I hope the government in Greece, and indeed the people of Greece, will consider the European Investment Bank, the EIB, the EU's financing arm, as a strong and trusted partner, and able and ready to support them in all of these efforts. As you well know, the EIB is the EU bank. We are owned by the still 28 member states of the European Union. We are, in fact, the world's largest multilateral lender, with about 64 billion in financing in total in 2018. And what we do is finance investments, finance projects that help the economy, that create jobs, that promote equality and support EU policy objectives. EIB's lending is not just about volumes, of course, it's about impact. It's about making a difference to companies, to the environment, to people's lives. Our mission is to make long-term finance available for sound investment in order to contribute towards policy goals of the European Union, fostering innovation, building efficient infrastructure, supporting SMEs, and protecting the environment. In that respect, I'm very proud that the EIB has stood by the most vulnerable EU countries in the challenging years of the financial and economic crisis. It has supported my country, Ireland, throughout its banking crisis, and it has stood by Greece, even in the most difficult times. Indeed, since 1963, with the exception of the 7 years of dictatorship, the EIB has never stopped its active engagement in Greece. And I'm pleased to be able to report to you that in 2018 we had another very strong year of EU bank engagement in this country. Last year, the EIB and our subsidiary, the European Investment Fund, which specializes in guarantees and securitizations and equity for SMEs, signed just under 2 billion of new financing that will support transformational investment by companies across Greece, improve energy infrastructure and enhance public services. Now, this 2 billion, just to put it in context, mobilizes about 6 billion in total investment. It's about 3 to 1. For every euro that we finance, we mobilize about 3 euros in investment. If you think about that in terms of capital formation in Greece last year, which was about 27, 28 billion, it's a fairly significant chunk of total capital formation in the country last year. Over the last 3 years, indeed, the EIB's dedicated investment team for Greece, led by Peter Jacobs, who is here amongst us, which comprises the bank itself, our subsidiary, the EIF, and our advisory colleagues, have worked tirelessly to further strengthen cooperation with Greek counterparts and to broaden the impact of our financing activity. And I'm very pleased to confirm that this is reflected in Greece being the largest beneficiary of EIB group financing when measured as a proportion of GDP among all EU member states. The EIB commitment of the EIB group to Greece is demonstrated by our outstanding exposure to projects in the country totaling about 19 billion. Now, about 17 billion of that has been invested since the crisis began in 2008. Now, if you think about that, that's about 5% of our balance sheet as a bank. Greece, say, accounts for about 1% of the EU economy, so you get a sense of the level of exposure that we have to Greece compared to its GDP. Obviously, what's more important than the numbers, however, is that each supported investment, by the way, we signed 36 contracts last year, which is the highest number of contracts ever. And each of these investments was very carefully scrutinized by our experts to deliver the highest value added. Economists, engineers, lawyers, finance and compliance experts are engaged in each of our operations to ensure that underlying these projects these projects are economically viable, technically sound, procured properly, which is crucial, as well as being environmentally and socially sustainable. We face the scrutiny of our board of directors, the representatives of the 28 member states. We face the scrutiny of the European Commission. We face the scrutiny of civil society, and this requires the EIB to constantly and persistently live up to the highest standards in the projects we finance. Of the total 2 billion in financing for Greece last year, about 1.2 billion of that was to finance the private sector investment in Greece. And this included direct financing to Greek global corporate leaders to accelerate investment in innovation, such as by battery company Sunlight, which is based in Xanthi, an Athens-based secure printing company, Veridos Matsoukis, excuse me for my pronunciations. I'm particularly proud also to offer support for small and medium-sized enterprises. So working with local banks, the EIB extended about 1.05 billion in financing in new credit lines or guarantees across the country that will increase the availability of much-needed trade, leasing and investment finance for SMEs. Of course, lending is only a part of our job. In countries like Greece, the bank is working very closely with the European Commission to blend our resources with available EU grants. And our aim is not only to assist countries to achieve a high level of structural fund absorption, but also to maximize the impact of these funds, often by setting up financial instruments in cooperation with the government and banking sector. In other words, instead of using these funds just for grant aid, where you only get to use the money once, these funds can be used to support financial instruments, debt and equity instruments to finance projects, so the money comes back again and can be used a number of times. The European Fund for Strategic Investments has also enabled the European budget to guarantee EIB and EIF financing, and I'm very pleased to confirm that Greece has also been the largest recipient of EFSI-backed financing since the initiative was launched. This is the so-called Juncker initiative. And over the last 3 years, a total of 29 different projects, including innovation, energy and SME financing, have benefited from EFSI support here in Greece, mobilizing over 11 billion in total investments, which is about 6% of Greek GDP. So for example, last year we launched the Equi Fund, and this year we will soon launch the Infrastructure Fund, and next year we hope to launch a number of other financial instruments under EFSI dedicated to the financial sector. In all these efforts, as important as transferring money is to transfer knowledge and know-how. We don't want to keep doing things for the countries, but we want the countries to manage to do these things for themselves. So over the last decade, we have supported the efforts of successive Greek governments to reinforce existing development and promotional agencies, and indeed to set up your own development institution, a Greek development bank. And in principle, we feel it would be beneficial for Greece to have a central mechanism to manage structural funds and other EU grants and financial instruments. Of course, while this is a good idea in principle, the design of the governance is absolutely key to ensure its effectiveness in delivering long-term policy goals. Let me conclude by saying the EIB is your bank, it's your public bank. Please count us as a valuable partner and a friend to Greece as you continue along the path to economic recovery. I just want to acknowledge the efforts of a large EIB presence here in building up a very solid and successful business here. Many of them are here amongst you. I also want to acknowledge the presence of Honorary Vice President Sakalaris, who was the last Greek Vice President of the European Investment Bank, and who really began to build up the platform that we're now working off in terms of developing our Greek business. So thank you very much, Vice President. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You can sit here. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, so we have the bell there.